Hello everyone, I'm here for Fiiber by India today and welcome to the endurance and performance battle between the two top dogs of the affordable smartphone category right now. I'm talking about the Moto G34 5G and the Poco M6 5G. Now of course there's an in-depth gaming comparison video of both these phones which is live on the channel. You want to check it out, you can see it right above in this card. But for now, this is the full throttle battery and performance test between both these phones. First up, the key specifications on your screens right now. So probably the main difference here is the 120Hz refresh rate on the Motorola versus 90Hz on the Poco. Now the Moto G34 is also powered by the Snapdragon 695 processor, a chipset which finally makes a lot more sense in a phone at this price point. The Poco on the other hand has the Dimensity 6100 Plus chipset along with up to 256GB storage, whereas the Motorola is restricted to just 128GB storage options. So quite a bit of differences here between both these phones in terms of specifications, but what about the difference between both these phones when it comes to performance and endurance? I mean, which among the two, the Motorola G34 and the Poco M6 5G is better when it comes to performance and endurance? Watch this video to find out. But of course, before we get on with the rest of the video, consider hitting that red subscribe button for detailed tech videos and also turn on the bell so that you don't miss any of our latest updates. With that said, let's get started. As always, we start with booting up both devices and the Motorola G34 is the first one to boot. So for this test, both smartphones are connected to the same Wi-Fi network. Light mode is enabled, brightness is set at 100% and the audio volume is set at 50%. Screen refresh rate is set at a maximum on both, that is 120Hz on the Motorola and 90Hz on the Poco. And of course, both phones are 100% charged. Kicking off with the 2 hours of YouTube video playback, both the Motorola G34 and Poco M6 employ IPS LCD displays 6.5 inches and 6.74 inches respectively, with the Poco having a peak brightness of 600 nits and the Motorola G34 having 500 nits peak brightness. On the other hand, Motorola has a 120Hz refresh rate while the Poco has a 90Hz refresh rate. However, what's the same here is the HD plus resolution on both, for which I would say unless and until you're not obsessed with the pixel count, you won't really be bothered by the display quality on offer here, as both of these suffice. Of course, not the brightest outdoors, but again, indoors and for the kind of price, the panels look good and are well tuned. Now, I did find the Moto G34's display to be slightly more vibrant versus how Poco has tuned theirs, but again, the difference here is so minimal that only side by side it is something you can figure out. But yes, 120Hz on the Motorola is good, but 90Hz on the Poco is also pretty smooth. You see, at this kind of budget, it honestly doesn't matter. Of course, Motorola's offering is better by the numbers. In practicality, I am not sure how many people are going to be able to differentiate. By the way, with 2 hours gone, the Poco M6 5G with its less power-hungry 90Hz display currently takes the lead with 80% battery left, while the Moto G34 now has 76% battery left. Let's see if the Motorola can redeem itself going forward. Okay, it is now time for an hour of 1080p video recording, and while both phones are at it, here's a quick look at the camera specifications. The Moto G34 5G features a 50 megapixel dual rear camera system along with a 16 megapixel selfie camera. The Poco M6 also features a 50 megapixel dual rear camera system, but the front camera here is a 5 megapixel unit. As for video recording, both phones can record up to 1080p 30fps videos from both the front and rear. So here are some of the comparison photos that I took from the Moto G34 and the Poco M6 5G. Now, which phone's camera is better overall? For that, I'll have to do a detailed camera comparison of both these smartphones. However, when it comes to the endurance bit while using the camera, which phone is better? Well, for that, currently the Poco M6 5G is again in the lead and by a wide margin right now. It is left with 67% battery, while the Moto G34 5G is currently left with 58% battery. So it is now time for benchmarks, and while we are not expecting performance crunching numbers here, still since it's a tradition in our battery and performance test to run a series of benchmarks for an hour. But first, the specifications. The Moto G34 is powered by the ever popular but now old Snapdragon 695 5G processor with up to 8GB RAM and up to 128GB storage. The Poco M6 5G is powered by the MediaTek Dimensity 6100 Plus SoC and comes with up to 8GB RAM and up to 256GB storage. So yes, as expected, very modest results in Geekbench. I mean, with these scores, it can be any phone's game. Of course, the Moto G34 did score higher in single core, but we all know that single core performance signifies basic tasks such as app opening times, scrolling through menus and stuff. Also note, for budget phones here, a score around 2000 in multi-core is good. Similarly, in Antutu also first up, since these are budget devices, I was only able to run the light version of Antutu 3D benchmark, but that aside, the scores again turned pretty decent for budget phones, with Motorola again taking the edge. Lastly, CPU throttle test results were pretty amazing. I mean, I know how efficient the Snapdragon 695 is, hence the 95% score, but no throttling detected on the Dimensity 6100 Plus is simply amazing. Now here's a breakdown of the benchmark performance of both phones on your screens right now. You can pause and take a look. But anyway, before we head on to the gaming round, the current battery stats, well, the Poco M6 5G is still in the lead with 51% battery left, while the Moto G34 5G is now left with 40% battery. So keeping aside the benchmarks, when it comes to the gaming performance of both smartphones, once again, similar sorts of result. The good thing that I found about both these phones is the fact that despite running Asphalt 9 Legends for long stretches, both phones did not overheat. Yes, they do get slightly warm, the Motorola a little more than the Poco, but no signs of overheating were detected. That said, these phones are not meant for hardcore gaming. I mean, for the namesake, yes, they can run any sort of game out there, but given this example of Asphalt 9 only at 60 FPS settings, the graphics don't look the sharpest. Of course, HD plus resolution screens, and I also did encounter some stutters and frame drops here and there. So yes, these are not your typical gaming smartphones, but at a budget of around 10,000 to 12,000 rupees, I am very much impressed with the performance. Now, if only Motorola could have had the endurance just like the Poco, then I would have liked these phones equally. But it is what it is, and right now we are on to the next round. But before that, the battery stats, and the Poco M6 5G is currently killing it with 30% battery left, while the Motorola G34 5G is now left with 17% battery. So we are done with the heavy tasks. It is now time to run an hour of social media. And while I would fast forward this to the end, right somewhere before 6 hours, the Motorola G34 died, and with that, the Poco M6 5G finishes with 17% battery left, while the G34 finishes with 0. Now here's an hour-by-hour breakdown of the battery drain of both phones on your screens right now. And if you haven't guessed by now, the story is pretty clear. Pure performance-wise, there's not much to complain about here, as both phones fare pretty well in the budget category. However, when endurance comes into play, it is pretty evident by looking at the chart that Poco M6 5G was the more efficient one here. Again, it can be argued that the 90Hz screen drains less battery than 120Hz, but isn't having a 120Hz screen an advantage for the G34? And if it has one, then shouldn't the company optimize it better? Either way, both phones are good, and your final choice would also come down to your software preference, that is if you want stock Android or MIUI. But still, if you're looking for a phone at this budget with performance and endurance being the deciding factors, and your choices are narrowed between the Motorola G34 and the Poco M6 5G, it is the Poco that makes the obvious sense. Either way, that's been it for the video, guys. What do you people think? Will you pick the Poco M6 5G or the Moto G34 5G if you have a budget of around 10 to 12,000 rupees? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, for all the latest in tech, stay tuned to Fiiber. I'll catch you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.